Welcome to Freddie's Huge Ask Podcast. Huge lives and the stories behind them.
3, 2, 1.
And now here's your host, Freddie Cruz.
Talking about book banning with award-winning author Amy Sarig-King, author of Attack of the Black Rectangles. Hello.
Hello, Freddie. It's really nice to be here
Thank
today.
you for joining the podcast. So the story is inspired by your real-life experience with an actual black rectangle attack. So let's start the convo there.
Sure. Let's see. Okay. So the main character of my book is named Mac Delaney. And so, yes, he experiences the exact same censored book and the exact same lines crossed out as what happened in my child's fifth grade year. He brought home The Devil's Arithmetic by Jane Yolen, and there were two areas that were crossed out for context, and we should always make sure we add context. The Devil's Arithmetic is a book about the Holocaust, and so the scene that the first censorship took, in which the first censorship took place, is a scene that is meant to be taken in exactly as written because it is a harrowing scene. And so anyway, yeah, it happened in my life. I tried to fix it with the administration in the school, and I was kind of blown off, to be honest with you, blown off as kooky, and that it was just a kooky author. And an author is the only person who would care about this. And I was like, no, I've written library policy, and I've been, I've done a lot of things in my life.
I know a few things. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but they were just like, no, whatever. And I tried to think 3 times. And I think what disturbed me the most was the reasoning behind it. Again, didn't come from the actual person who used the Sharpie marker, but it came from the representative, we'll say their administrator. And the idea was really kind of knocked me back. And that's the idea that boys would giggle. And I found that incredibly sexist. I found that to really underestimate boys. I found it to be, there's so many things about that.
Yeah,
I don't even know how if we have enough time. There's a lot.
That's a lot to unpack. And I will just say that I've heard that argument before too. We're in Texas, but with regards to dress code, which it's kind of like that. Which kind of falls under that. Not kind of, but it does fall under that same umbrella when it comes to free expression. And why can the guys wear short tennis shorts, but the moment a girl wears something that might rise up, which is not even a cutoff, but might rise up if she's raising her arms, all of a sudden the boys can't handle that. And I mean, look, I was a teenager at one point in time. It's not what I always thought about. I mean, come on. I think we're underestimating boys and really playing into this whole, we got to protect. And I think I don't say this lightly, because I think that it seems like they're trying to come from a good place, like that protector space, but with any plan, humans are the best and the worst part.
That's true. And it's funny because you brought up dress code, because, again, underestimating boys, like, they'll be distracted. Well, okay, by shoulders. Like if all it takes is shoulders, then, perhaps we need a new class in school to teach, something, but it's not true. These are all adult ideas. Both of those ideas you just said, those are all adults. And disturbingly, with the second, idea with dress coding, is that immediately, if you're talking about a school setting, that means you're sexualizing minors before they do it themselves. When you're putting a third grader or a second grader through a dress code that is specifically geared toward girls' shoulders, whatever, that kind of thing, you're sexualizing young bodies. And that is exactly, funnily enough, what you say that you're trying to protect young people from. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and as a woman with very long arms, I was very tall, I was 5'11". So when I was growing, I was that gangly kid who had, like, at one point my arms were just so long. So if I was going to wear shorts the length, to my fingertips, that classic old rule, I would really be wearing kind of, shorts to my knee. You can't buy those anywhere, by the way. Like, they don't sell those. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and you bring up a solid point about, sexualizing kids that way, and it behooves us to go back to the book, because wow, what if that's happening with the dress code, then that's using the same logic, doing the same thing with a story about the Holocaust, and
Now,
that is
that's
problematic on many
yeah,
levels.
that's the thing, right? We can cross out that word. We can cross out that anatomical term, right? But I actually had someone, I was speaking to someone the other day, and they asked me what the word was, and I told them, and they immediately went to, oh, well, it's always about sex. And I let him go on, and then I stopped. I said, whoa, that's not actually about sex. We've sexualized that part, of the anatomy, but that actually isn't about sex at all. So we go back into our own perceptions. And where do we get these perceptions as adults? Well, we had a lifetime of experience to get that perception. If you take that experience, the pieces of that experience out, maybe you wouldn't have it. Why are we taking things away from young people when they can actually, oh man, young people are capable, smart, resilient, unbelievably savvy. Oh gosh, this generation especially. Whoa. I mean, imagine growing up with the internet. Imagine growing up with all these things. They're so smart. And immediately, we try and protect them from things, and then you got to dig a little deeper, though, Freddie. A lot of the conversation right now is saying you're protecting them from protecting children from whatever it is you deem inappropriate things. Well, a lot of those inappropriate things are actually very valid and very normal things for a lot of people. Like, for instance, there've been a lot of challenges against books simply for having characters of color, simply for having characters who might identify as gay or transgender. These are real people. They are in your real schools, and you can't get rid of them. And yet, if you want to get rid of books about them, that's sending a clear message to people that they are not welcome in your town or your school. And I will tell you this, I go into schools, I talk to young people, and the coolest thing is that young people believe in all are welcome. Even if the adults are saying you're not allowed to put an all are welcome sign on the wall, which, by the way, that's not okay. That's sad. That we're in a place where they're outlawing that sort of thing. But young people actually do stick up for their classmates, very much so.
Yeah,
which is wonderful.
And I want to go back to the collaboration with Jane Yolen in the book, because this was, again, inspired by actual events in your personal life. How hard or how easy was it to get a hold of Jane? Like, hey, yeah, so there's this problem with some rectangles, and now I'm writing a book about it. Would you like to, work together?
It was a very interesting road. I'll tell you what, Freddie, to be honest with you. Okay, so when the censorship happened, I went to Facebook, right? Because, and Facebook, my Facebook is crowded with librarians and teachers and educators, sometimes teacher trainers, that kind of thing. And so when we felt like in that thread of, hey, does anybody have this book? And then I put the two pictures, which, up there. And that's when we found out what the words were. And then everybody was, people were like, what is this? Like, that's crazy. Somebody popped in and said, should I tell Jane Yolen? And I said, no, not yet. I'd rather approach her with a solution. Of course, I never got the solution, did I, Freddie? So what I did was I wrote the book first. And I let Jane know that I'd written a book and that this is what had happened. I'd written a book and I wrote her into a book and that I needed her to read it. She didn't have to say yes, but if I got any of the words that I put in her mouth wrong, then she could let me know. And I think I did let her know a little bit before then, but then I sent her the manuscript and she was absolutely brilliant about it. And she actually has a cameo in the audiobook. So if there are audio listeners out there, I love this audiobook. Pete Cross did a great job as Mac, but Jane Yolen's parts, I probably listened to it about 9 times. And every time I absolutely sob because she's honest. She's real. You can tell she's real right there on the other side. She's an amazing person, but yeah, she's supported me through this, which was really great.
And I will say the part where, and I don't want to give anything away of the book because it's just as important for grown-ups to read as their kids. And I'm telling you, you're listening to this podcast, this is a book that you definitely want to read. But the part where Jane makes the appearance was just a
Yeah,
chef, one big chef's kiss. and
it was
and
beautiful, wasn't
yeah,
it?
I mean, it was like, yes, like kind of like the kids in those darn high school kids in Footloose, but like more important because we're talking about book banning. Yeah, but
Yeah.
um going back to another kind of secondary plot, or maybe, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth that this is a secondary plot, but something that I picked on while reading the story, in addition to the importance of why you shouldn't ban books, is family. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite scenes that may or may not have made my eyes a little moist was a conversation in the square between Mac and his grandpa. So can we dive into that?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little wide and then come back to that scene. But yeah, from the beginning of the book, Mac is navigating. He has great support. He has his mom and he has his granddad, which is his mom's dad. His dad has been estranged from the family, but he comes around and he's controlling. He's also manipulating in the way where he kind of tries not to seem controlling, which is how controlling people do things. And from kind of the very beginning of Mac's dad's appearance, or Mac's dad's involvement in the book, it's pretty clear that he yells a lot, that he is manipulative, certainly controlling, manipulative, and violent, and disrespectful, I guess, in a way of his ex-wife and his son's possessions, things like this. And a lot of people have kind of jumped on that and immediately went, oh, well, he must have a mental illness. Freddie doesn't have a mental illness. He has exactly what many, many people in this country have, which is an entitlement problem and a mindset problem, and a problem with control and thinking that's what he's allowed to do. People said anger issues. Well, if he had anger issues, he'd be breaking the possessions of his boss and his neighbor. No, he only breaks or hurts the possessions of his family. And so Mac has this. And because it's so muddy and difficult to put a finger on, like it's not like the first question when you get into, any sort of conversations about family violence, let's say, so, well, is it physical? That's always the first question. But in actual fact, here's Mac dealing with this strange manipulation where his father has at times told him that he's actually an alien, and has told him all these other things, all these weird kind of distractions from the truth, which is he's not a nice guy. That's about it. There's plenty of those in the world. And that has acted as a really interesting litmus for readers, because the people who are like, oh, he has a mental illness. It's like, oh, look, you've been trained to make excuses for violent men. How interesting. So was I. And so have most people.
Yeah.
Right?
You hit the nail on the head
right?
with that. And I will tell you, I couldn't figure out what the deal was with his dad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the point. And neither can Mac until he look, he shows himself time and time again, right? First, he's yelling at them over rabbits. That's on like chapter 2. And then he's, showing up and not showing up. And then he's kind of weird. And then he breaks some things and he steals some things. And it's just disrespect, and it's entitled disrespect. And so it's interesting because how does a young person navigate that? I'll tell you, as an adult, I didn't know how to navigate it in my own life. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to call it. And I immediately tried to make excuses too. But anyway, when Mac deals with it, what we forget is that when children deal with that, they carry shame with them, right? So as adults, we're like, oh, I have a shame, I have regret, I have this, I have that, all these different things. But when a child is witness to it and is trying to figure it out, they carry with them embarrassment and shame. And then, of course, if it's a parent, then half of them is confused. They don't know what to think about half of them. It's their identity. And so I really loved that Granddad could step in and talk directly to shame. Shame is a reason for secrets. Secrets are a reason for shame. One feeds the other. It goes on. And this is one of the reasons why, so many of us, when we reach our 40s and 50s, trip over our trauma. And that's one of the things when I go into schools and I talk to young people, I don't talk about it as frankly as I'm talking to you, but I talk about things that may have happened to them in their life that, look, if they're walking around with heavy baggage or shame, that they need to talk to somebody about it, because they don't want to go into the beginning of their life when they're young and, figuring out all the new stuff that they're going to do. being weighed down and denying, denying who they are, where they're from, just because an adult didn't have the skills to put them first.
Yeah, and it's a tough thing to navigate as a kid, because, as you know, the human brain is not fully formed until the age of 25.
Right.
And so you're having to navigate, and as a kid, you really literally are quite dependent on the grown-ups around you, and depending on them to be of sound mind, and with nobody being perfect. And I'm not trying to pretend like I'm any kind of perfect parent or whatever, but kids depend on us to be leaders, and whether we want it or not, that's how we are viewed by kids, and not even our own children, but kids that we happen to be around, whether it's a little cousin or a niece or a nephew or whoever.
It's true. I mean, modeling. I added something now that I got back on the road this spring. Once I could do that and go back into schools, which is my favorite place to be. And my usual, I usually am in high schools, although now I do go to middle schools and even younger for these younger readers. But it was wonderful to add a little something to my kind of content this time, which was, I tell a story about someone I know. She had just turned 20. I mean, a month passed, right? And I immediately, when I talk to teenagers, I start out really quickly and I say, listen, did you know that the word teenager really didn't come into popular usage until the 1950s? Why do you think that is? And then I say, and they don't answer. And I say, it's because people wanted to sell you stuff that you didn't need. And now we have social media, which makes you feel small all the time. I know that because it makes me feel small today. I don't know what was on your Instagram ads today, but my Instagram ad is incredibly overconcerned with my neck wrinkles. And apparently it doesn't know that I'm 52 and I'm supposed to have those, but I'm supposed to feel bad about it. So I buy some snake oil. And I can, do this kind of thing. I said, they're doing the same to you. And then I ask, what did Instagram tell you should have been doing today? And they'll immediately, I get hands up. Oh, it's acne. It's, I got the wrong pair of kicks. I need a new phone. And so we suddenly are on this wonderful plane. And then I talked to them about what growing up looks like. And I said, teenagers are actively, as adults, we are actively encouraged to bully teenagers all the time in our culture. The minute you say, oh God, just wait till she's a teenager, just wait till he's a teenager. And I mean, I do understand, look, I've raised 2 kids. So it's like, yes, they say little people, little problems, big people, big problems. That's absolutely true. I get that. But that sort of ennui we have with a teenager before they're even teenagers, we have this eye rolling, right? So I was with this relative and she had just turned 20 a month before, and she had a little brother, and still has a little brother, and I mentioned him, and she turned to me and goes, oh, rolls her eyes and says, teenagers. And I was like, wait a second, you turned 20 a minute ago. And here's the thing, look, we talk about our inner child a lot when we get into psychology and sort of the way that we can heal ourselves when we're adults, if we've walked with shame and things like this. We have inner teenagers. Every single adult has been a teenager before. And a lot of us are really embarrassed about us as teenagers, right? We really are. We're embarrassed by the dumb moves we made, the mistakes we made. We're embarrassed maybe about the situations we were in, whatever. And we leave that teenager behind, but we do it with shame. And therefore, that's not really growing up. That's abandonment. And that's what I've been telling teenagers this year. I've been like, don't abandon yourself. When you turn 20 and 25, you remember what you were like, and you help teenagers and you help kids because you're abandoning yourself. You're not just abandoning those people are so immature and they don't understand anything. And I remember being like, oh, you don't even understand music. Yes, they did. They understood music. They just didn't like my music. That's all. It's almost like a push towards superiority. And I think that generational superiority has got to stop. We need to have more important conversations than the constant cycle of, I don't want you to see this, or I'm protecting the kids, or all these different things that keep coming up and up in our culture. We need to make some steps forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And who's to say that a 17-year-old doesn't have more maturity, even though scientifically speaking, their brain is not fully formed? Who's to say that a 17-year-old isn't more mature than a 34-year-old who's plugging away at their 9 to 5 and goes to happy hour 3 days out of the week and goes to work hungover, and then on Saturday is blowing off house chores or doing whatever?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I work with young people, and I'm a volunteer, so I've worked with young people who are navigating grief, navigating abuse, navigating, oh my goodness, so many different things. And I will tell you, man, what a resilient and mature group of people teenagers are. And absolutely, I know a lot of teenagers right now that are way more mature than a lot of adults I know. And that's real. Maturity isn't just your age and whether, how much hair is in the drain or whatever it is, it is being able to stop, think, have critical thinking. And that is one of the things that taking away information, taking away information means you can't make the right decisions, or make decisions with the full deck. And you need the full deck. You need to be grossed out by stuff. They say that, what is it? A good library has something to offend everyone. And I think that's true. I think it's absolutely
And I
true.
forgot who the comedian was that said people who get offended easily should be offended more often. So there you go. I think it might have been Margaret Cho. I think somebody can correct me on you. Well, the internet loves to correct people, so maybe somebody will correct me on that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to
sure.
be very respectful of your time, Amy, and go into our lightning round and begin with if Mac Delaney could give a TEDx talk about any banned book, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh no, that's terrible. I don't know. I mean, Mac Delaney at 12, I suppose. I mean, this is really that's a tough one. I didn't know you were going to hit me with this. Let's see. I would love him to do it on Slaughterhouse-5, frankly, but that's because that's what I would want to do it on. I think he actually would probably do it because this is the one that's closest to him. I think The Devil's Arithmetic would be a good start.
Slaughterhouse-5, banging book.
Oh,
yeah,
what a book! I'm a Vonnegut. That's my happy place.
What was the last book you read, and what are you currently reading?
The last book I read was Hummingbird by Natalie Lloyd, for middle graders. Beautiful book, highly recommend it. And what am I reading right now? I just got it yesterday in the mail, and I got home late from an event, but I started it. It's called Lolo's Light by Liz Garton Scanlon. It's out. Whoa, I've heard her read it at the college. It's beautiful.
What is something you once believed that you no longer believe because you had access to information that helped you change your mind?
Oh, boy. God, everything. The first thing that came to my mind, Freddie, sounds crazy, but it has a lot of the reason. There's a reason I work with Mental Health America on things, but that suicide is selfish or weak. Sounds weird, but I work with people who have suffered that loss, and I, as someone who's suffered that loss myself, it's one of the things that like 90% of the people on the planet believe, just because it's the last place they stop. They're like, I don't want to think about that. It's selfish, and they walk on. And the more beautiful loss survivors that I meet, and the more I learn about their loved ones that they lost, the more I realize that that is unbelievably not true.
Amen, sister. Yes, all of that. Yeah. Yes, and yes. Amy,
Yes.
Best place to get a hold of you and find out all about what you're doing?
Best place to find out what's going on with me is go to my website. It's as-king.com. It's a little dusty at the moment because I'm doing some construction, so sorry to invite you into the house while it's a little dusty. But there you'll find links to Instagram. Instagram's probably the best place to keep up with me, and Twitter as well.
Attack of the Black Rectangles by Amy Sarig-King. You do want this book in your life. And Amy, thank you so much for coming by the podcast.
Freddie, you rock. I'm so glad that you had me on here. I think you're awesome. So I thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Freddie's Huge Ask podcast.